The necessity of suffering, why things have to go wrong in life. You know, this is going to be a cheery one. Now, if you haven't seen The Good Place on Netflix or whatever it shows on in America, then you're missing out. It's a very funny program. It's a little bit chaotic and all over the place, but essentially it's about the afterlife and what happens after you die. And I'm someone that really hates spoilers, so if you do hate spoilers, this doesn't really spoil it, I don't think. But at a point in the story, they arrive in the good place, and there's all of the great people from history you'd expect to be there, and they've been there for thousands and thousands of years since their deaths. And in the good place, they can have whatever they want at any given moment. They can do anything they want. They can see anything they want. They can experience anything they want. Just literally at the click of a finger, they can go through a door, and all of a sudden, whatever they want, their wildest dreams are there. So, how do you think they feel? Bored. That's right, bored. There's absolutely nothing to go wrong for them. So they know that their experience is going to be a good one. And so they feel bored because they've experienced, it's been tens, hundreds, thousands of years for them, and they've experienced nothing but everything going right for them. So they're bored. In fact, they are so bored that some of them simply don't want to live anymore. But the problem is that they're already dead. So they've been granted this afterlife of sheer perfection, and they're bored. Now, people speak about winning the lottery and how, if they were to come into a huge sum of money, everything would be better in their life because they could have anything they wanted and they'd be able to unburden themselves of all of the difficulties they have in their life. But that's just simply not true. That's not often how it plays out. People talk about wanting to shift themselves of their burdens, their troubles, their difficulties, their responsibilities, and just live a nice, peaceful, normal life where nothing bad goes wrong. But is that what they really want? Today, I'm going to be talking about why suffering is actually necessary in life. Bless me. I'd like you to think about a film you've watched recently, or maybe a series, or perhaps a book you've read, but I'm going to go with film. Now, most films, if you get away all the fluff and everything else, the film is broken down into like 5 parts. Part one, you're introduced to a protagonist, a main character of the story who you grow to like in some way. Two, the protagonist has some sort of goal or that they want to achieve, and that becomes obvious. Three, a difficult obstacle preventing the protagonist from achieving this goal is put in their way. Four, the protagonist struggles against this obstacle, perhaps losing something along the way, and nearly doesn't succeed. And finally, part five, the protagonist succeeds, but perhaps at some cost. Now, I'm not saying that all films or stories or books follow this exact path, but 90% of them, I would say. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, things being formulaic in that way. But let's imagine watching that film or experiencing that without the obstacle in the way. You'd have someone who you grow to like, they want something, and then they achieve it. Does anyone want to sign up for a film where someone just appears, you like them, and then they get what they want? I'm going to go no on that one. Something of that nature would hold all of the excitement for an adult that an episode of the Teletubbies would. The fact there is struggle, the fact there is conflict, the fact that you don't perhaps know how it's gonna turn out, that is what makes the story interesting. And without it, the story is categorically boring. The fact that they might not make it, the fact they might lose something along the way, that is what makes it interesting. One of the reasons that Game of Thrones has been so successful and so popular, and so many people talk about it, is because the author of the original books he doesn't care about any of the characters whatsoever. So he's happily just kill off the person that you like the most in the most brutal and painful way imaginable. And you're like, oh, was not expecting that. I have to talk about that. That's interesting. Blah 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 blah. If all the heroes stayed alive all the time in films, get very very samey very quickly. Is your life so different from a film? Now, if you look at the kind of individual stories of your life and how they play out, yes, they might be a bit more about Sandra in accounts being a bit of a douche or some guy called Brad ghosting you, but the story formula remains the same. You have a person who's you have a goal, you have some sort of obstacle, you struggle against it, and then there's an outcome. Maybe with the outcome you get what you want, maybe you lose something along the way, maybe you don't get it at all. But is it really that different from a film? I don't want to sound like I'm belittling anything that you're going through right now, any turmoil, strife, or difficulties. I'm just kind of relating it to the formula I said before. And yeah, maybe with all this, you're not getting the outcome you want. But potentially, played out on a longer scale, the outcome that you think you've got at the moment is actually part of the turmoil and bit you have to overcome, potentially. As humans, since the days of cavemen, we've got the drawings on the walls as proof. We have lived through the idea of stories and retelling stories. It's part of our kind of DNA makeup that we retell stories to learn and to educate, other people. Now, I'd like you to think about your proudest achievement to date. And I want you to imagine retelling it as a story. Now, when you think about where you were and where you got to and that path that you took and why you're so proud of yourself, is it all rainbows and butterflies and unicorns? Is it just a kind of straight line where everything just got better and better and better until you achieved that moment? Or is it much more likely the case that it was all up and down and there was a particular thing or maybe multiple things which you had to fight through, which you had to overcome in order to get there? And going through all of that stuff is part of your story of your proudest achievement. So it has to be part of that. Otherwise, you wouldn't have felt so proud. At the time of it happening, you definitely wouldn't have chosen to go through what you went through. You wouldn't have chosen the struggle and the heartache and the difficulties. Perhaps it felt insurmountable at times, like it would be absolutely impossible to get through. Perhaps you even felt like giving up at times as you were going through this. You simply didn't know how you were going to get through it, but you didn't give up. The willpower, the determination, the resilience that you showed during those times of adversity is what makes that story that you kind of are mentally telling yourself right now. That is what makes that story interesting. It also gives you increased hope and belief that you could overcome more adversity in the future. If you were to do a deep dive on this subject of the necessity of suffering, then you'd probably end up looking at the philosophy of Friedrich Nietzsche, who basically said, life is suffering, so you'd better find something to suffer for. Now, for me, that's just a little bit too dark that life itself actually is suffering. That's just like, whoa, easy there, Frederick. But apparently he wasn't a very happy man. Funny that. But I do partially agree with it in the sense that there is always going to be suffering in life. It's just absolutely, utterly unavoidable. And this is where the importance of contrast comes into our lives. And we grow from our experiences as well. So when we go through something difficult, we have to find mental strength. We have to find willpower, resilience, determination, whatever it might be, in order to overcome whatever we're experiencing. But the contrast part is interesting as well. If you've been ill recently, then maybe the couple of days after recovering from being ill, you say to people, God, I feel so good now. I feel so much better. I feel great now. But a couple of days ago, you felt absolutely terrible. 2 days after you said you were feeling great, you will have forgotten how grateful you were just to feel, inverted commas, normal again. That suffering you went through made normal feeling feel great, but then you forget about it again. Being in love feels so much more special and incredible to you if you've been through real heartache. Being in company feels so much more wholesome if you've experienced true loneliness. We are also aware that difficulties and adversity is going to come into our life at some point, whether that's going to be mild inconveniences, whether that's going to be something pretty bad, or whether that's going to be something truly gut-wrenching. It's all going to happen to us at some point. It is inevitable. We do, however, have to experience this suffering in order to appreciate the times in life where things are a lot easier. And there are times where things are a lot easier too. Obstacles and failure force us to grow, and they force us to change and almost alter our personalities. They actually make us who we are. And without them, without this suffering, we would be absolutely perfect. And as a consequence, boring. And as The Good Place has shown us, or if you haven't seen it, it will show you that a perfect life is a boring life, which is no life at all. Now, I appreciate that this is a slightly dark, maybe slightly twisted way of looking at things. I want to know what you think. Let me know in the comments, or drop me a message and let me know what you think of this. I mean, I personally think, we have to suffer in order to appreciate the good times, and without it, like I said, life would be boring. It makes it interesting and it makes us better people going through hardship. So many examples of this, probably anecdotally from your friends and throughout history as well. But I really would like to hear what you think about what I have said today. If you've enjoyed this, then please consider checking out my other rants on different things. If you suffer with anxiety, then you can check out my free anxiety toolkit. There's a link in the show notes below. And there's loads of other podcast episodes, videos, and blogs for you to consume. If you're interested in having a consultation working with me one-on-one as a life coach or hypnotherapist to overcome whatever issue you're experiencing at the moment, then check out the show notes below. There's a link to book a completely free one-on-one call with me. I've been Chris Busey from GYSD Coaching. Have a wonderful day, and I will catch you again soon.